Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Coolbaugh. Today, we have with me a very special guest, Brian Wilson. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Daniel. I
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
appreciate
yeah,
you being here. I'm excited for it.
yeah. I anytime I can get somebody on, who does not just do fantasy, it feels pretty good. I feel like I've just had so many fantasy authors be like, please, 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 for season three, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And it was like weird at the start because like I was trying to like schedule people, and like I said before we got going, I like to try and space things out, but it was just like releases and my schedule, other people's it just didn't work. So I'm just kind of
Yeah.
like season three is just kind of like a free for all. You gotta try and look at the list and
Yep.
see who you want to look and watch that that episode this week, stuff like that. But yeah, but I'm glad that we could get you on for this later half of season three and talk about the power of the stars in both books. And we'll start off with that first question there. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
My writing journey, it's probably not similar to most people's. It's been very ebb and flow, come and go, very inconsistent. So I started writing, I actually started outlining the first book of my series, which is called The Forsaken Planet, over 20 years ago. It was actually the very first anything I tried writing. I've
Oh,
tried multiple other things during that span, but this was the one I kept coming back to. And
yeah.
and yeah, so I just, it all started. I first read The Hobbit when I was 12, and that launched me into my love for fantasy, which eventually launched me into my love for sci-fi. And as I got into my later teens, that turned into a desire to just really want to write. Um, and so yeah, I started trying with The Forsaken Planet, and I don't have the background of, I never went to school for creative writing courses or anything like that. I've never even been part of writing groups. So it's just been kind of in that come and go in that 20 years of teaching myself a lot of, the proper way of writing, self-editing and stuff like that. And that was the majority of that 20 years. Like I said, I'd write a little bit here, I'd take a year off, write a little bit there, self-edit there, take a little bit off, rewrites, blah blah blah, and that went through college, that went through getting married, that went through starting a business, that went through building a house for my family. So it was a very long process. That's why I say a little inconsistent and not probably your normal. I know a lot of people you hear take some 10 years to write their first book,
Yeah, yeah.
but a little bit different. But yeah, that continued straight through till about 2 years ago. I opened the draft up for the Forsaken Planet for the first time in probably 5 years or so
Oh,
at that point, since before my kids were born. My oldest is 5 now. And I read it, and it was almost like reading someone else's work because I hadn't looked at it in so long. So it was like the first, I don't know, it was the closest I came to reading it and not having that kind of, I don't want to say bias, but just not knowing what the next sentence is already going to be,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
so when I read it, I was like, man, again, I'm biased. I wrote it, but I'm like, this is good. I got to get it out there. I got to at least see if other people are going to like this. And yeah, so I bunkered down at that point. I got an editor, I got beta readers, and I went through the whole process of really, really cleaning it up. At that, and again, I had done a cleanup in the past. At one other point, a big cleanup, but that point at the end of 2022, early 2023 was when I really, really bunkered down and cleaned the thing up to the best of my abilities at the time, and just then taught myself self-publishing and got the book out there. So yeah, I mean that's been my writing journey, and then besides that, when that finally released, I actually started getting some positive feedback on it, which gave me kind of, because I didn't know what to expect, and that kind of gave me a kick in the butt. And then my second book was a completely different, the complete opposite, because that book from start to finish I'll have published in about 10 months, a 10-month span.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, yeah.
So where my first one took me about, I want to say 5 or 6 years to draft the first draft of it, this one took me 3 months to draft it. So, and there's the first one's 175,000 words. This one's 145,000. So a little
Wow.
less, but still,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, that's been my writing journey up to this point. So it's been a
Well,
little
that's
crazy.
awesome. It's yeah, yeah. It's just funny because like people are probably like, did he tell these people to say these things over and over again? No, it's just that It happens over and over again where, you said mention right off the bat, like it was an idea that didn't leave you alone, right? And we always talk
Yeah.
about on here, at least I always talk about like write the book that won't leave you alone. I have a couple that maybe I'm not quite ready to publish, but it's again, it's that, I've written it and I've rewritten it a couple times. I'm like, eventually I know it's going to be great. I'm like, I think sometimes people just have to be a little patient. We've had quite a few authors that are like, oh, that was my like fifth book, they write a trilogy or it was their fourth or fifth or whatever, like I had to go back to this idea. I had Kelly McCullough on here about a year and a half ago, and that was the Fallen Blade series for him. He went, wrote the first one, didn't really like how it was, got Webmage going, had a few of those out, and then that company was like, hey, we really want something like in a set of fantasy world, dark, and he's like, oh, I have this original idea, and then it becomes one of my favorite series of all times. And that was that idea that wouldn't leave him alone. So, and it's
Yeah.
funny that it's just like since I interviewed him, it's like almost every single person that's come on has said that in the last year and a half that like, oh, I did this, or it was either that, like for you, like Forsaken Planet was the one that wouldn't leave you alone, or it's like, maybe like the new project or something like that. But it always ends up being the one that, you know, authors feel really good about, readers feel really good about. It seems to just be some sort of connection universe or something, if that makes sense. Or it's that
Yeah.
idea
No.
that doesn't leave you alone. It's almost like it's a story that wants to be told, right? And it
Yeah.
tells you. So it's kind of cool that that happened to you as well. So that's neat.
Yeah, and I think that's needed because we're all, especially I'm an indie author, so we talked before coming on here. We got our lives, we got our families, we got our other jobs. It's got to be something that's really pulling at you. It's for you
True.
to take
Yep.
all. I mean, it takes a lot of time to write a book, so it's got to really really pull at you to keep bringing you back to it and spending what is basically all your available free time to work on it. So it definitely makes sense in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. I had a friend, he's like, do you watch this TV show? I'm like, no. I'm like, I
No.
binge watch TV. I'll watch like, I watched Reacher and then I was like watching Reacher season two
Reacher
and
was
then I'd watch Percy Jackson, which I liked a lot. And then I was writing one second. And then once I was done with it, then I was like, okay, I was doing something else. But it was like, I mean, that was like Friday nights was like pretty much my time from like 9 to like almost 1, and throughout the week I was just like I just took the time.
yeah.
But like I usually don't watch TV now. It's like I don't watch TV. I have history or the History Channel, like Curse of Oak Island, but nothing else I really care about. Like I have the last 3 episodes of Wheel of Time, but I'm like, yeah, whatever, I'll get to it. But everything else, my friend, he's like, you're just like go to work, do this, come home with the kid, your wife, clean, and then
That's
you
the
read a little bit.
life.
He goes, then you write. Yeah, I was like, or I just don't read, read. But I was
Yeah.
like, the writing has to be done. I was like, I can always read later. But yeah, it's like just like I like how you said that. It's just like any other time. He goes, all your free time is spent doing this. I was like,
Oh, for
yes.
sure.
So
I mean, I used to always love watching all the best top shows, everything out there. But
yep.
same once I really like a couple of years ago started bunkering back down in the writing. There's no time for it. That's your only time to write. So it's when you got to get it
Yeah,
done.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Yeah. My
priorities, I guess.
students are Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. My students was, did you see? I'm like, no. My friend was kind of interested. He goes, I used to watch all the movies. I go, yeah. I'm like that, but that's like 2 hours. That first of all, I can't just sit and watch a movie. I have a kid. I go, but like, each night I'm like, why? I was like, I might as well just write. And
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot cranked out outlines on different things. But now it's like I just don't even enjoy sitting and watching TV. Like it's got to be something really gripping, like Reacher, or something
Yeah.
like that. Like I'm really excited for oh, Avatar, Last Airbender, whatever. But other than that, I'm like, let's keep writing. I
Yeah.
don't like miss it, so it's kind of interesting. But
Oh,
well,
same
that's
boat
really
here.
cool.
I understand it.
Yeah. Once you get to that point, like I was just talking to Michael R. Fletcher about that a couple weeks ago. He's like, once you get to that point, he's like, it's just nothing else really seems to, just to. It's almost like that's your relaxation time then, which doesn't make sense because you're literally using all your brain power to
Yeah.
build worlds and people and stuff. But it's just more
Yep.
fun that way. But yeah.
Yeah.
So what genre or genres do you currently write in and why?
Um, well, so my book series, I call it a sci-fantasy series, and
Nice.
so that's would be my two genres, science fiction and fantasy. And that the main reason is that is just the two genres I have always loved. I said when I was 12, I read The Hobbit. We read it for school. That was the first book that I opened, breezed through the pages, and just I'll never forget. I went up to my teacher after, and I was just like, I need something else like this. Is there anything else
Yeah, yeah.
like this out there? And she just smiled and she was like, it's actually something just like it out there. So the trilogy, obviously, Lord of the Rings. And yeah, that just took me off. And from there, and like I said, it molded into sci-fi later. Ender's Game was the big one that I read later in high school
Great book.
that I just love. That's actually a very heavy inspiration to my first book, The Forsaken Planet. It was actually after reading that book that I really bunkered down to start doing an outline and wanted to get
Oh,
into
cool.
writing. Um, but yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, also I don't have the background, like kind of that English background, that English college classes, college courses. So for me, my background in writing is all of the reading I've been doing it. I'm 37 now. That started when I was 12. That's 25 years of reading books pretty avidly. So that's my background in it. That's what I feel most comfortable writing. I've always been very interested in like dystopian as well. I
Mm.
think, say a writing career took off big time for me. I definitely think I would want to write something in that genre in the future. But for now, it's sticking in the science fiction and fantasy realm, which my series really is kind of a pretty. I consider it a unique 50-50 blend of both.
That's awesome. I was just talking to some kids about that recently at school because they were writing something. They were doing all these things. I was like, "What are you doing?" Like, "Oh, writing this thing." I'm like, "Okay." I was like, "So what genre?" They're like, "Well, it's got sci-fi, it's got fantasy." I was like, "All the best books do." I was like,
Yeah.
"That's why Star Wars is the greatest to me."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just awesome. Well, that's super cool. I definitely understand the dystopian thing too, though. There's just like something about, especially the dystopians that people have, written. I feel like recently, like Fonda Lee, Jade, War, things like that. I mean, people have, I feel like it used to be a lot of, back in the day, at least what I was reading was like a lot of, um, Road Warrior, Mad Max, that kind of thing. But now it's like, Water Wars, Water World, those kind of things. But yeah, I feel like now it's like dystopian has taken like a whole new, meaning to it, and people have come up with just some of the like coolest things that I never would have thought of. So for me, it's like, oh, that would be really cool. So I never
Yeah.
would have thought of
Yeah.
being, I like the books, but I never thought of writing it. But now I'm like, I do that, kind of feels like urban fantasy, but a lot different with the dystopian themes and stuff. But there's still a lot of cool things. I think people have, kind of widened that genre out a little bit. So
Yeah,
I
for sure.
definitely
Well,
agree
I
with
think I think
that.
it's getting pretty popular. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
thing with it. That some people are writing these kind of shorter, quick dystopian books, but they're becoming these long, 10 plus book series. They're getting wide
Yep.
readership. That's and it's understandable. I think a lot of our entertainment and whatnot, TV, you got shows like The Walking Dead and stuff that I mean that's zombie obviously, but I think that stuff kind of that's almost like a that just kind of set the stage for kind of that love of dystopian taking over a little bit for at least my age group, the older millennials.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Maybe it's also we're feeling a little bit more dystopian than we have in the past, but
Yeah, that's probably a better point right there for sure.
either way, either way. So this is my favorite one to always ask authors, really just about their books. So what are your Power of the Stars books about, and how did you come up with these ideas?
So they're sci fantasy, as I said. My first one really well, I like to consider their space opera books because that's just always been my I've always been obsessed with all things space. But they're really mixed in with kind of epic fantasy. The first book starts off contemporary sci-fi, I guess you could say. It starts off our contemporary world, and there's an alien attack basically that occurs on Earth. And it follows from there. It follows our just ordinary 20-year-old. They're really kids. They're 20 years old, young men, but they got a lot to learn still. I think we all were a little immature at that time. No one likes to admit it at that. They don't want to think it, but when you get older, you realize it. But uh, but yeah, no, the events unfold and it kind of turns their worlds upside down, and a bunch of revelations are made without spoiling too much. We come to learn that this force that attacked, they're human, and there are multiple other human worlds out there that humans live upon,
Cool.
and they have purposefully kind of kept themselves hidden from us. There's a reason behind it, but one of the main reasons is they can wield the power that's called Solera, and it's basically think the Force from Star Wars, but except everyone can use it. It's not just a pick and choose. Some people, everyone has it, and so because of that, their worlds completely revolve around it. Their tech, their weaponry, just their day to day life, everything revolves around it. And so, kind of spoiler here, but that's why Earth is what is called the Forsaken Planet. And and what happens is there's because there's all these groups, there's this big power struggle going on. There's other factions, obviously, and that power struggle is what led one of these groups to finally come and reveal themselves, I guess you could say, to Earth.
Mm.
And so yeah, and then the with the power struggle going on, that first one came and attacked. There was a reason for that. And then the second one kind of comes in and says, "Hey, there's this war coming. You were just attacked. Come with us. We'll train you to fight. We'll train you to use this power because off of Earth, any human can use it. And vice versa, the people who can use it off of Earth, they can't use it if they go to Earth.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
that's a myth. That's a big mystery behind the story. But yeah, so then the main characters, like I said, their world's turned upside down because they're caught in the middle of one of these attacks. But the main character, especially Colton, and he's got to kind of make this choice of does he want to do this or not. There's more that comes into play, chosen one prophecy arc and all that, and kind of the fate of mankind resting in the balance. And again, a little bit of a spoiler, but they do obviously go off. They travel to one of these what I call is like a futuristic fantasy world, and they start to train, and that's really where the story kind of goes from there, without trying to
That's
spoil
cool.
too much of it.
Yeah, like NJ Kuhn, we were talking during our like live thing for or show for TBR Con for the podcast open up for TBR Con. And I can't was it that when we were together or if it was like the episode that her and AJ before that, but like whatever I was listening to with them, maybe it was that, but like she mentioned with her book too, she goes, it is so hard to sell a book too
Oh,
because you're trying to sell book one. You can only say
exactly.
so much, and then you have to say. So I've been like thinking that nonstop. So it's so funny because you're like the third or fourth person in a row that like had a book two or book three. So it was like so hard to
Yeah.
sell
Well,
it
you
to us
can't. What can
without
I
like
say? I can't talk about anything really of book two because you got to read book one for it.
Well,
So,
it's like Glenn Cook, man. Glenn Cook, like, I read like the first three in Chronicles of the Black Company, and then I had the fourth one sitting. I had 35 pages left. I thought much can't happen, and sure, or I think I had 13 pages left. Actually, I remember that it was 13 pages left, and I go to look at the next book, and then somebody died, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, so I like. It like
oh.
totally ruined it for me. So I had to finish that book right away and then start the next one to see if they came back or whatever. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just like, so yeah, I can only imagine, like, so I don't look at like if I'm reading your book one, I don't look at anything. I'll buy book two, but I won't even look at it.
Yeah.
My wife's like, "You buy book two without reading book one and even looking at what it is." I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine." Somebody, told me about it. I was like, "It's probably really good." So I'm horrible. I'll just buy it. I'll
Yeah.
buy the whole trilogy without even reading book one or the back or the blurb or anything, as long as it looks and sounds cool. But no, that sounds really awesome. I
Thank you.
like a
Yeah, I
lot of the
found.
things that you set up there. So that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I mean, to go along with the whole second book thing, I mean, I have found a little bit of success with people who've read my first book. I do kind of tell everyone my second book is very different from my first book. The first book was kind of the setup, I guess you could say, if you will. It's the whole, it's a training book. It's a heavy training book. Don't get me wrong, there's still great stuff that happens and fun stuff and the story takes off. But the second one is definitely more so where this one's like a training novel. I say the second one is much more a picture kind of space opera, but with Mission Impossible, Indiana Jones kind of style adventure vibes, stuff like that, which is more what I envision as the series progresses a little bit more
Cool.
past that point. So I've had a little bit of success, I guess, kind of relaying it as that, at least to the people who've already read book one, because
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
you know what happens, it's kind of ooh, that's exciting. So
Yeah. It's always interesting because I heard somebody say that about a book too recently, like where they're like, "Oh, it's so different." I'm like, but book one was basically like the Karate Kid, like the first one. It was literally a training montage, and then they like did the thing and do the thing. And then somebody had asked me about like like Cradle, like Will White's first book, and I'm like, what did you expect? Like,
yeah,
I'm like, he's getting out, he's doing this, and the world. I was like, you're just need him in this village the whole time. I was like, you didn't think book two was gonna be something with traveling, or whatever. I was
yeah,
like, yeah, the rest of the series is very different from, that first book. But I just it always amazes me because I'm like, yeah, Daniel's son goes to Japan he trains a little, but it's not the main thing, you know. I'm like, now he's
Yeah.
like using his training. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're, I don't know. It's weird. It seems like, you know, like trilogies like that should have set people up. I'm like, Luke goes to train on Dagobah. I'm like, so maybe that ruined it for people, you know, greatest sequel of all time. Maybe people think that there needs to be more training in these sequels. I don't know. But I never expect that with the first one, you know, like
Yeah.
Mistborn. I hope to God there's not a whole lot more training in, you know, book two. I just want to
Yeah.
get to the story part. The training was cool, but I don't want to do it for three books in a trilogy. So I don't know. I just kind of thought that was interesting recently. I'm like, what are your? I think it's like I think the author's fine. Your expectations are kind of interesting. But yeah,
It's
that
all
sounds
about,
really cool.
yeah, it's about finding that balance and that subjective nature, of,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
in my mind, I can only go by what I know. And after I would, very much enjoy my first book, but at the end of my first book, I'll be like, okay, no more training, but that
Yeah,
was my
well,
intent,
obviously you have some here and there, but yeah,
Yeah, of course. But,
yeah,
my intent is I took these characters off of Earth. I want people to
yep,
be drawn into the fact that they're almost like us. So you got
yeah,
to kind of believe that these ordinary Earthling kids left our planet, went to this other crazy futuristic one, and not only learned this power, but became adept at it, and
yeah, yeah,
that's going to need to be very believable for the second book and the events that occur. So that's kind of the strategy there that I took. But you know,
yeah,
it's that balance. It's some people want the one chapter. They went to the training facility. The next chapter, they know all this and that, and some
yeah.
people want to see that struggle and see that how it all unfolded. So
Yeah, yeah. I just thought it was a funny comment. And like, so I think I saw it in a review a while back too. I was just like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I was like, I don't want
yeah,
every book to be like training montage after training montage. I was like,
yeah,
First Matrix was good with it. It was cool. But I was like, if they had done that every single one,
the
I was like,
movie would be
I
terrible.
don't think. Yeah, exactly. I was like, you just be, yeah. I was like, then the people be complaining because you did the one trick pony too many times. So but
Oh,
I
definitely.
just always point out because I think it goes to show you, right? And I always laugh too because one of my friends was having a really bad day with the reviews, and it was like 3.5 stars out of five or something. But they were like, "Oh, this person said this," so I went and like found like the greatest, like and most horrible reviews for Brandon Sanderson I could. I sent him like my top 10, and it was fun for me because I was like, "Here's a guy that just like how many millions of dollars off the last Kickstarter," and I go, "He does not care." It's
Yeah.
like what these people say. I go, he only cares about what he wants to write, you know, and does this. So I just, he's like, well, you don't care what anybody says. I was like, no, I really don't. It's like
Well, you
I
kind
was
of
like, you
can't
just
when
write
you're
the
in
book.
this business. I mean, you
Yeah,
can't.
I'm like, you have to have thick skin. Somebody asked about the
Yeah.
YouTube this. They're like, well, yesterday in the podcast group, they're like, what happens if someone says a nasty comment? I go, well, I'll just delete it and move on.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, sorry if you don't like the interview or something we said or whatever. I'm like, this is whatever. I'm like, yeah. So I told my buddy, he's like, yeah, I don't think you're gonna read very many reviews. I was like, probably not.
Probably
Probably
not.
not. He
Yeah.
goes, well, I had another guy ask me like it would be life shattering. He goes, well, what if someone doesn't like my first book? I was like, write another one. But I told him, I was like, I said, how many billions of people are in the world? I'm like, you just got to find your audience. I'm like, somebody's gonna like your
That's
book,
exactly
I
it.
was
I
like,
mean, that was a big confidence boost to me at the start of like, don't get me wrong, I haven't had all praise, but
Mhm.
just getting a chunk of praise, it tells you, okay, I'm not the only one who likes this story. I'm not the only
Yeah,
bozo who's been writing and thinking about it for the past
yeah,
20 years, and other people
yeah,
actually like it, and that makes it worth getting out there. And
yeah,
then
yeah,
don't get me
yeah.
wrong, you get negative feedback, and many times if it's told in a positive light, you can take
Yeah,
that and grow as a writer. But
yeah, yeah.
I hate sometimes though
Well,
it's there's nothing positive about it. It's just like this, and
yeah,
this. You're like, who takes the time out of their day to just do that? But
I well, it's like Dirk Ashton came on here with the most famous review I think ever. A guy DNF'd at like I think it was the second Paternus book. DNF'd at like literally like it was deep. It was like 85-90% because the character died. And then if they had just kept going, they would have realized that that character was fine. And they like did a 1 out of 5 and ranted. And
uh,
so Dirk, they talked about it on their podcast, so it was still going, and then we talked about it on here season one. I just laughed. I was like, "You were already there." I was like, "Why wouldn't you just finish the book?" But yeah, it was just, but it was like 1 out of 5 stars, and and Dirk was just like, I don't know, man, some people. So I hope that person really like, heard at some point and was like, oh, I'll finish the book. But yeah, but
Yeah.
it's just funny, right? And I've seen people now that where Amazon does that stupid thing where they'll complain the book was ripped, and it's like, how on earth is that Brian's fault? It's like
Yeah.
that's Amazon. That should go, in the email, not in the, the book. I'm like, that has nothing to do. So I always
Yeah.
tell them like stars are so subjective. I'm like, I was talking to Andy
They
Pelican
really
about
are.
this privately. We were just like talking about that on, or sorry, on his comment section or something he put, and I was like, I don't even read blurbs anymore. Like, I
Yeah.
was like, I don't read reviews. I read a blurb, but sorry, I don't read reviews. I'll read a blurb. I've never been a big review person. I'm like, if your cover's cool, your concept's cool, your blurb's cool, I'll read the book, particularly on my Kindle. But I
Yeah.
always just find it funny when people they're like, "Oh, I'm not doing." I'm like, "Don't even worry about it."
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you have to have thick skin, particularly being
Oh, for
any
sure.
author, but an indie author. But so this
Especially
is
nowadays, everyone's
yep,
so opinionated nowadays, and
oh,
everyone
yep,
thinks they're right about everything. So they just
yep,
go to town in some of these reviews without
yep. We
realizing,
survived a pandemic, and that's what we
yeah,
do with it. So
yeah,
tear
everything is
someone's work
subjective.
down. Yeah, I said to one guy, I was like, "Have you ever written a book?" Because like something he was saying, I was just like, "Oh my goodness!" But it was a book I really enjoyed too. But the last question really leads us into the next one, which I'm really interested to hear answer for. When it comes to world building, like where did you start? Did you start with Earth, or with the alien races you created? Like, kind of which way did you go there? I'm just curious. Like, where'd you start?
So I have a prologue that's very short, which kind of gives you a glimpse into kind of these other world the fantasy aspect, I would say, of it. And
Hmm.
that was on purpose, and that's because it's a shot on one of these other worlds. And the purpose for that was because the beginning, the first 20 to 30% of my book is very heavily, it's the contemporary but sci-fi feel, like I'd say a contemporary sci-fi feel. So I didn't want readers to pick up my book and all of a sudden they're getting 35% in and the fantasy elements become more prevalent and they're like,
Yeah, yeah,
what the heck is going on here? You know?
yeah, totally.
But yeah, with my world building, I definitely started with Earth. It's definitely a push of mine that I kind of want you to start into this story, and hopefully people can read it and say, "Oh, that's almost like me and my group of friends," and relate to it in some capacity. And and it builds from there. Then when all the kind of revelations are made, they're being made to you, but to the characters at the same time. So you're almost taking them in just as the characters are. And of course, as I said, we transgress to these worlds later. That's when things start to open up more, and the world building and the lore of all these other worlds kind of opens up, and you see more of it. As opposed to being told more of it. But yeah, I mean, I've always been obsessed with kind of Earth's ancient history, the mystery behind the ancient past. Think back the time of the Ice Age and stuff like that. They always there was kind of a major drop off in the population of the planet at the time. And we still don't really know. We have our theories of what caused it, what happened, but not 100% sure in any capacity. So it was really cool. My whole lore revolves around that whole thing. The way
Cool.
these planets are connected to us dates back to that time, and
Mm.
it's they kind of revere these prophets, they call them, and the prophets are all their names are the names of all the planets. Earth being one of them. Earth was a woman who supposedly lifted our world way back when. So it was just fun to kind of take my interests like that and create my own
Yeah, yeah.
mythology. But that's very much the foundation of my world building, where I can connect it from our contemporary world to these other worlds I created out in space.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's just too much fun. Like, my
Yeah.
friend said, I sent him like this great, I don't know. He's like, this guy's crazy on TikTok. I'm like, I was like, I didn't really necessarily believe everything he said. I said, he's like talking about Book of Enoch and all these things and these giants and stuff. I was like, I just really liked it as a writing resource. I'm like,
Yeah.
here's a guy that's just saying some cool stuff that at some point I could put in my urban fantasy. Because I got a lot of ancient stuff going on, and there was one that some guy shared about like the Aztecs and vampires ruling the empire and stuff. And I was like, that's cool. I was like, that's going in my novel, in my world building. And I just now have too much stuff, to go through. But it's like, yeah, like nobody knows, right? So it's just fun to put that stuff in.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it's
that's
almost
why I mean,
easy
yeah.
to do too. Like with mine, you have all these cultures across the world. Yes, they're all different stories, but they're kind of similar in many regards too, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
how many lores of groups across the globe have the whole Great Flood idea and stuff like that.
Oh,
So like,
literally, I there was a new research statistic that said I saw a paper a while back, so like 90, like 98 or 93 or something like that percent. And you're talking like Native American tribes too, like all the way
exactly,
from North
exactly.
America, Central South. And something I was listening to one guy and he's like, yeah, well, that was just a migration. You know, they came from the original people. I'm like, that only explains one section. And then they were like, well, it must have been older and come from, Africa, and then they're going across the land bridge and stuff. And I was just like, okay, but yeah, there's so many things like that. Like the dragon, I think is an interesting one too, where there's like how on earth are you on? I don't know. Like I was watching one documentary, it was so cool where it was like the 10 things that we all share, and that was like dragons, the flood story, pyramids was like another one, that kind of mathematics and stuff. It was just like
That's yeah.
absolutely fascinating. But yeah,
That's another
that
big
stuff
one of
was
mine
cool.
too. Yeah, because the pyramids, they're spread across, some are buried in rainforests and stuff, but they're spread
Yeah.
across the globe as well. So it's like, how did these people who are supposed to kind of be, they don't have anywhere near the technology we do. They created all the same structures. It's just, it's cool to be able to take that kind of mystery and kind of mold it
Yep.
into your own reason for it all. So,
Yeah, that's like my favorite thing in global like history for freshmen. I teach history, so to get them to understand like here's our timeline, and then here's everything we know, and then to get to put in Gobekli Tepe and then completely blow it apart.
yeah.
It's just so much fun. And they're like, "Oh, I thought we knew all these things." I'm like, "We don't know
And,
Jack." I'm like, "Really?" And yeah, and then, to point out some things. I mean, it's always fun to see them, get interested in to be like, "Oh, like we've really only recorded 1% of our history, really."
yeah.
Maybe 3%, So I always tell them like I love historical mysteries, and to see them get into it, and like it's just I think it's just part of us, right? Like we want to know where we came from. We want to know
Oh, yeah.
like where the missing link is, right? Like it's just part of our nature, right? I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that's what makes it fun to be an author, because you get to give people those things, right?
For
Um,
sure.
it's just what makes it fun. That's
Yeah.
why we don't write
No, and
fiction.
and I love it especially because I get to connect it to my other love, which is space and the universe and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's
Yep, yep.
how does all that mesh together, So
Oh,
that's kind of where my
there's just
story
too
goes.
yeah, yeah. It's just too many. Like I like I originally was reading sci-fi and then got into sci-fi and then got into fantasy, so I was kind of different than most people that we have on here. Most people go fantasy, sci-fi, I feel like, but yeah, I was like, there's so many things. My brother and I love ancient aliens, you got African tribes who said they met aquatic aliens, and I was looking at space. I love space too, and I'm like, well, most of our moons have water on them in some capacity, so
Yeah.
maybe the aquatic aliens are I don't know. But
Yeah.
like in my books though, it makes it really fun to, make that connection.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll have the guy sign, or he's like aliens and with the big hair. Well, one of my copies or something, that'd be really fun. But yeah, it's just yeah, it makes it fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like really cool world building. So I'm really interested. When I was reading the blurb, I was like, oh, this just sounds really cool. It's definitely up my alley, between history and just like space. And I just love to think, like what if you're the one that had the right idea, and
No,
kind of go
definitely.
from there. So it just makes it, yeah, makes it really cool.
Yeah, well, it
So
was
how
definitely.
yeah,
Oh, well, no, I was just gonna
no,
say. I
go
mean,
ahead.
it's definitely a goal of mine of like, these things we don't. I think that was kind of the appeal of, say, Harry Potter was it took place in our world, right?
Agreed.
So
Yep. Yep.
people are just kind of like, who's to say it's not me? Who's to say this? Who's to say this isn't happening in the background? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
I think I definitely wanted that to be something with my story of people could read it and be like, huh, who am I to say that's not going on right now?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. No, well, there's so many weird things, right? Like I think the increase of the cell phone and TikToks and things, like I will go down a rabbit hole every night because the algorithm knows I love just stuff like that, and
yeah,
and like glitches or whatever where people catch, or I don't know. It's like you never know. Like maybe those lights in the sky. I saw one where it was like blue and green, and I mean there were just all these lights. It was really weird in the night sky. It's like who's to say that Voldemort and the boys aren't up there fighting, duking it out, Like I don't know, but it just makes it fun. The kids all the time. I had this girl, a student 2 years ago, and she did not believe in Bigfoot. And I brought her so much evidence and stuff, and we would argue all the time. She's like, "No, Mr. Kubal." I'm like, "No, listen." And I would just well, like at one point she was like, "I admit there's the smallest chance that there's something out there we don't know." And it took me a year and I was like, "I won." She's like, "No, you didn't. I didn't say it was Bigfoot." She was, "I think there's some." And I said, "No, but I just wanted you, a skeptic, right, to believe in something." I said, I
Question it.
said, "There's too many times." Yeah, just
Question what you're hearing.
something fun. Yeah, something fun, like, oh, like I tell kids all the time, like, the fact that we know everything and we're all powerful because of science of this, I was like, it's no fun,
Yeah.
and I guess it's just part of the fantasy and sci-fi lover in me, and I want something else to be out there, I want there to be worlds like and people like you're talking about, right? Because to me that just makes life so much more interesting than going to work every day and paying bills and paying taxes. Like,
Monotony. Yep. I
yeah,
gotcha.
it can't be it. Yeah. So that's really cool. So how books do you plan to write in the Power of Stars? Or and like maybe like how did you decide like that number?
So I'm hoping my sweet spot. I'm trying to keep the series between like 5 and 7. Um, and really my rationale behind that is so I created. We were just talking about the world building. There's 11 planets, including Earth, that people live on in my world, and they're all different cultures, societies. Like I said, factions. So I want to give a glimpse of that. Obviously, I talk, you like especially the first book. You get a lot of talk about these other ones, but I can't show all 11 worlds in the first books.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
but I want to get there at some point. Some are going to be more than less, obviously, where the story takes it to, but I can't do that in a trilogy. Obviously, I think when I have 11 of them here, it would be too rushed. But at the same time, I don't want to drag the series out to just make that a point of doing when it's
Yep.
not isn't a core focus of the story itself. So I think for what I have, I don't have the full story mapped out but for what I have planned, I think 5 to 7 is that sweet spot where I can still show all these different groups and worlds and incorporate it into the story that I have envisioned for it. And it's basically where I am with that.
That's cool. Yeah, I've definitely seen people do that. They're like, "Oh, I had to get to this spot." And you're like, "Yeah, but have you ever read books 7 or 8 of the Wheel of Time?" Like,
Exactly.
you're like,
Wheel of Time
"Oh."
is my favorite book series, actually. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
with that said, nowadays, we were talking before we came on here. We're both parents. We're both limited time. I can't be getting into series that have 14 books anymore because that'll be my next reading for the next 2 or 3 years. So I'm lucky to get
Yeah,
one book
yeah, yeah.
a month. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
Thank you,
yeah, no.
Audible.
So I think that's probably part of the reason too, why I'm trying to keep it under that 7. But I've never been a big trilogy reader, which plays into it as well. I do like a little bit of a longer series.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
fall
totally. Yeah.
you fall in love with characters. I want to stay with those characters for a little bit.
Yep.
So that plays into it as well.
Yeah, no, totally. I definitely agree with you there. That's why I like, going to Druid Chronicles, Jim Butcher, like yeah, I do like longer series, particularly if I like the characters a lot. So yeah, I totally understand that. Like Terry Goodkind, Sword of Truth, things like that. But
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, I totally get you there. Yeah.
I read Sword
It
of
is hard
Truth,
though, like
Jim Butcher,
yeah,
all of them.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's hard when you see somebody you're like, this could have been cut in half or this could have been, whatever. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it's always hard, right? Particularly, when you're just starting out, writing book one, two, or three, I think even, to really kind of decide that. I have people ask me that all the time. I'm like, well, I go with three and then kind of left my prequel novellas like that for my urban
Yeah.
fantasy where it's like there are three. I wrote three and it's an arc. And then people like the prequel novella stuff, then sell a couple, then maybe I do that as reader magnets or something like that. I kind of just had a story to tell and kind of want to do it before the main book, and kind of left several years in between that and the first book. So,
Yeah.
I think indie authors are it's so nice where we just get that ability to choose, right? Like if
No,
you
for
wrap
sure.
up in book four, you're like, all right, book four, and if you need 11, I guess you need 11, right? People really like them, then that's what you do, right? So it's just kind of nice for us to have that ability. So I like
Yeah,
that
and
flexibility.
that's something that's kind of big now too. Is novellas? I feel like are kind of getting a little more popular than they were
Yeah, they're
necessarily
popping up
in the
again.
past.
Yeah.
And so that's I say 5 to 7 main books for my story, but
Yeah, yeah,
who knows
yeah.
how many novellas? I mean, something I'm working on right
Yep.
now is a novella for my series, so that's not included in that 5 to 7. So that's
Yeah,
other
yeah.
ways to kind of tell things nowadays too, which is
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah. I love sci-fi novellas. I'm like actually reading one right now, John Scalzi, The Dispatcher. It's really good. So yeah, I'm a huge sci-fi novella fan. They're
Nice.
always my jam. So what is one thing you want to try in your next book that you may have been hesitant in terms of the first two? Maybe like a POV, maybe like a different strategy, like just something in general.
Um, I don't want to say it was something that I was hesitant to try. It's just something that hasn't come up in the story yet, but I'm very excited to be able to write kind of just this grand ultimate epic space battle, but not
Oh yeah,
just
yeah.
space involved, but like, takes place across a whole globe or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't
yeah.
get me wrong, my first two books have plenty of battles and stuff like that, but nothing that's kind of to the scale of going to decide everything. It's not the end all be all. It's not a whole billions of lives, a whole world's fate falls on it. And it's something I do envision for the future of my series, and it's something I'm excited because it's really going to kind of test me, I think, as a writer.
Yeah, yeah.
It's definitely not something that's easy to write. It's sure it's simple enough to write a single battle and there's strategy
Yep.
involved with that, or a mission and there's strategy involved with that. But when you're talking a battle that takes place 10 different places at once, and
Yep.
that's I think juggling a lot of things. But I'm excited to hopefully incorporate that into my story somehow in the future. So we'll see.
I would say thanks, George Lucas. That Return of the Jedi, like everybody has to have that at some point.
Yeah.
Timothy Zahn, Kevin J. Anderson, I feel like just did a Michael A. Stockpole. Yeah, just those Rogue Squadrons. I love the Star Wars books because those guys just did such a good job with those bigger battles. You felt like you were
Oh
in a
yeah.
movie, right? Like in and out, and everything was on the line. And yeah, it's just
Yep.
always so much fun in terms of sci-fi. So I
Well, even
definitely
out
think that's a good one. Yeah.
well, even outside of sci-fi, fantasy, I think of Wheel of Time, The Last Battle. I mean, God,
That's true.
it's
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
whole final book. I
Yeah,
always think
yeah.
that's so cool. You're kind of, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily going to build to that, and that's going to be the end of my series, but it's just I just feel like for me, a lot of the good series I've read have always had that one book just has that grand
Totally.
epic ultimate battle, and
Yeah.
I have, like I said, there's a lot of fighting and a lot of battle scenes and stuff in my first two, but I'm excited to get to that one down the road in my series.
No, totally. I was thinking the movie King Arthur with like Clive Owen, where they had
Uh,
that big battle at
uh,
the end. It was
yeah.
it was amazing. Like, but like I've read a couple of, fantasy books for sure that just like did such a good job of like, like the Helm's Deep battle,
Uh,
um, Gondor, things like that. I just felt like, there's some books that did a really good job with
yeah.
that. So as a
One in the
fan
Butcher books, the Jim
author,
Butcher
it's a
books. There was
yep,
that one
yep,
that takes place. That was really good. I mean,
yep,
that's deep into the
yeah, yeah.
series too.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's true. But yeah, I think I agree with you to be able to orchestrate and write something that big and weave it together. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely. I think in any genre, I think that just be like the feather in the cap, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yep.
what. Yeah, I think we all strive to do and would be really cool. But yeah, that's a great answer. I like that answer.
Oh, thank you.
What is one scene from the first book that you were the most proud of to write?
Uh, I, you sent me this. I know you sent me this question. I had a tough one thinking about this
You want
one.
to you want to pick a couple? You want to pick a couple? That's fine.
Well, that's kind of where I
I
found. So
won't make you pick your favorite child. That's okay.
for me, endings are everything in books, right? I mean, it's the last impression you're going to get on a book. I think it's going to leave the overall greatest impact for a reader
Yep.
on the book. How often do you hear the beginning was okay, but the ending was fantastic, and that book is still considered a great? You're not really hearing that if, oh, the beginning was great, but the ending sucked. You don't hear that as much that book was considered something great, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
so for me, it was very important to write a really powerful ending, and I think so. For me, that's where it falls. That's what I'm most proud of, and it's really not one scene. There's two scenes in my ending that just one I just feel like did a great job of. It's hard to talk about without spoiling it. Obviously, it's kind
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
to the climax of the
yeah,
story,
yeah.
but it just did a great job of capturing the emotion, capturing the kind of loyalty and the bonds that have formed up to that point, and capturing the fear and the heart of everything that in the character development that all led to this one point. And I just think it came into a culmination of just coming together really well and resulting really well. And then you combine that with a scene. It's not back to back, but a little bit later, that's just kind of a jaw dropping scene. And at least I think it is. Hopefully, it is. That's the intent, at least. But yeah, I just think the two combined really did a good job of what was taking this story, kind of turning the script on it and changing the tone of it and getting this really ready for what's to come after the fact. Which is, as I said, my first book I feel is very different. I've been done a few interviews now, and I keep saying I don't know if this is a good plan for a debut first book by an author, but it just was my plan. I was always heavily inspired by I didn't talk about Band of Brothers before, right? The miniseries.
Man, that's a great one. No, that's a great one.
Yeah, I was heavily inspired by that. So, and if anyone who's watched that series knows, the first episode is very different from the
Yeah,
rest
it
of the
is. Yeah.
series. And so
Yep.
that was kind of always an intent of mine, was to kind of make this first book kind of like the first episode of that series. And then when it takes off from there, just expect what you expected in that series. Like in that series, episode 2 through whatever it is, 8 or whatever, it's just like a
Yep.
nonstop crazy ride. That's kind of what my intent is on this one. And I think those two scenes I did at the end of book 1 really do a good job of just kind of opening everything up, turning the script, raising the stakes, and just setting the pace for what's to come next. So I was very, something I was proud of, I guess you could say,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
book.
That's super cool. I look forward to that. I have to ask you before we're winding down here, who does your covers and the lettering? Because I absolutely loved them. So I was just curious.
Oh, thank you. So my first one, let's see if I can show it to you. It's right here. This was I actually so I told you how when we first started, how I went did a hard self edit
Mhm.
probably like 5 or 6 years before I released the book. This was a pre-made cover. It's by the Cover Collection. Is
Wow, that's a great
But
one.
I mean, I customized it a little bit
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
I worked with them, but that was way back when I was thinking of publishing, and they were great. I contacted them again 5 years later to make a couple more changes, and it was like I had just talked to them yesterday, so they were really
Oh,
good.
that's awesome.
But yeah, it was the Cover Collection with them. That's how we did the first one, and then the second one. This is my one coming out later this year. This one we did customize from the start. I worked heavily with the woman's name is
Mm.
Debbie with the company. She's fantastic, and they were just great. I kind of told what I wanted. We went back and forth a bunch of times. I was able to actually find the image of the temple myself on a Shutterstock, and we put it
Oh,
all
cool.
together. And I was able to actually do it for an affordable price. It wasn't neither one of mine have I gone out and had to get pay an artist to also. I pay the cover artist, obviously, but
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of people who want that customized, they have to pay like an illustrative artist, then go and bring it to a cover artist and do the cover art.
Yep.
I was able to keep it just with the cover artist and really get exactly what I wanted. So yeah,
That's cool. I really enjoy the lettering. For both of them, I just loved the like the blue and white for the Forsaken Planet.
yeah,
Like
I,
with the
I love
colors
the
underneath.
same thing. That's what drew me to that.
Yep.
That was already part of their pre-made cover was the
Oh, that's cool.
colors are really what drew it to me. We went over the font. That was part of what we changed was the font and everything. But I
That's a
think,
great font. Yeah.
yeah, I love how it just kind of hangs behind the globe and
Yeah.
everything.
Yep.
You almost get Star Wars vibes from this.
I agree. Yeah. Yep.
I always say my
It's
book
like
is
old
kind of
school. Yep.
it's Ender's Game meets Star Wars almost basically.
Yes.
So
Yep. Yep.
it's
Yep.
definitely what I was going for with it. And it's
Yeah. Yeah.
different, I
Yeah.
feel like, from a lot of the other stuff that's out there also, which I kind of pride myself on trying to be unique with my story. So that was definitely what I tried to go with my cover.
Yeah. Well, I think it looks unique enough and updated enough, but it's still to me like resonated like that classic like 80s, 90s just like look overall. So I just wanted to point out to our audience, that there's like you were saying, right, that you work with somebody but necessarily wasn't like a painted cover and stuff. And I just
Yeah.
want people to know that, there are things that you can do or people you can contact, right,
Oh
who
yeah.
can do great things. Like my cover artist, Gray Ratliff, like he does an amazing job for my novellas. He was able to, do them very, very reasonable. And they look great. But yeah, it's just to me, like when you're doing sci-fi in particular, you really gotta, get the genre down and, understand it. So I just thought that particularly, I like both a lot, but particularly book 1, I was just like, ooh, the designer in me just loves what you guys did with it. So I
No,
just
I
want to
appreciate it, man.
point
I
it out. Looks
appreciate it.
really good. And it sells the
Because
genre really good, I think, is, with your you know, you'd not, no, you don't even have spaceships on there, you know, but to me, it's like, that's sci-fi, you know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
with what, you know, you've talked about with your story and, you know, the blurb and stuff, I mean, you know, it's clear that, I don't know. I thought the cover was a really good direction, in particular. So I just wanted to point that out. So
No,
thank
I
you.
appreciate it, man. Thank you. Because I was definitely a little bit insecure about it, just because nowadays
Oh,
everyone you got the fanciest and most gorgeous looking covers in the world, and I got this one 5 years ago. I'm like, is it gonna res? But I've always
mm,
been just kind of proud of it. I think especially if you read my story too, it really kind of captures the vibe of the story itself.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm proud of it. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no, yeah, you should be. It looks awesome. So we're winding down here for our last question, but I always want to make sure everybody has, you know, enough time, you know, to answer this one, to its fullest length. Do you have any news, updates, or current projects, anything like that, that you can share with us?
Yeah, well, the big news for me is I'll show it one more time. This is book 2 of the Power of the Star series, The Son of the Prophets. It's that is releasing April 16th. So I said this before, but if you kind of like the idea of a space opera with Mission Impossible, kind of Indiana Jones adventure vibes, go read The Forsaken Planet now, so you'll be ready for The Son of the Prophets when it releases April 16th. But yeah, other than that, I'm trying to look into an audiobook for The Forsaken Planet. It's a little bit easier said than done at this moment, and especially trying to do writing at the same time. It's not something I could
Yeah,
promise,
yeah.
but something I'm hoping to try and get done in the near future. And then other than that, I'm in the middle of writing a novella which is related to the series that will
Oh, awesome.
it'll work as a standalone. It takes place decades before any of the events of the series, but at the same time, it'll make most sense read between books 2 and 3.
Mm,
It just kind of is gonna there's gonna be some mystery between the two books that this will help explain a little bit of it. It'll be a good lead up into book 3. It's also going to introduce some new characters that will become more prevalent down the road, and it'll introduce also it's going to show us some of the baddies from the first 2 books
oh, cool.
that I think people are fans of after reading the books. So yeah, but that's about it for now. It's otherwise, we can only do so much. And then
Well,
I'm writing book 3 is all.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I always talk about this. I have to laugh the last couple months because people are like, I don't have much going on. It's like, just had this book come out, about to have this book come out, working on book 3, have a novella. I'm like, in traditional publishing, that's like 4 years of publishing. So, you know, in
Yeah.
terms of
Yep.
indie, I'm like, that's a lot. I'm telling you, that is a lot going on, you know,
That's a ton.
even
Yep.
just like one novella. Yeah. So that's like really fun. But yeah, well, that's
Even
awesome.
even a novella
Um,
is what 2 3 months of work minimum you're talking about there
at
for someone.
least,
So
yeah, at least I've been working on 3 for like 3 years right now, like on and off. It's just
yeah.
been like, and that the amount of work I have to do from now till the end of the summer just to get them, you know, not even just fully the 2 and 3 written and prepped, but just like, oh my God. I told my wife, I was like, might as well just wrote them in one book, but I want to do a Kickstarter for, you know, like an anthology and do some different things, illustrations and things. But yeah, amen, right? One novella is a lot of work. So I
Yep.
definitely understand that. Writing in general is just a lot of work and stuff out there and stuff. But
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
well, that's super cool. I thank you so much, Brian, for coming on. Really look forward to reading The Forsaken Planet myself. Yeah, it sounds awesome. As soon as I read the blurb, I was like, yep, that's my kind of thing.
Well, thanks again for having
Definitely
me.
my vibe. So
I appreciate
yeah,
it,
yeah,
man.
yeah. Yeah,
Had a blast.
anytime. Just want to make sure that, you know, if you're new to the podcast and you're listening or watching, just make sure that you go down below Brian's socials and all of his book links and everything, website, all that stuff. He's already sent it to me, so it'll actually be down there. It'll be down there right now because you're listening or watching it to us on this podcast. Make sure you go and, you know, check all of his books and everything else out. All the socials. We just want to remind people we're really trying to, you know, review authors. That doesn't just help them, that helps the cover artists, editors, you know, topographers, you know, things like that. If you have an audio book you're listening to, please make sure you're reviewing that. That helps the, you know, narrators that we've had on recently, you know, everybody that's working on all those things and the authors as well as the cover artists who don't want to forget them because they're really integral to this whole process. So just please make sure you guys go do that as much as you can anywhere where you can review those products, and we would all really appreciate it in the community. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to talking to you soon on social media. I look forward to having
Sure.
you, you know, hopefully on in the, you know, near future for a seminar on sci-fi or something like that. It'd be really cool, and get you on a
I'd love to
panel,
come
and
on.
we'll have some fun. Sounds good. Well, you have a good rest of the day, my friend, and I'll be emailing you shortly.
Sounds good. You too, man. Thanks.
See you later. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.